Welcome. It is a new year and a new season for our Tech Leadership Series. I'm your host, Francis Rose, with the Government Matters Thought Leadership Network. We're kicking things off with innovation. It's more than a buzzword. It's a discovery or a series of discoveries that result in a more modern and secure architecture for federal IT systems. Today, you'll hear about some of those discoveries at the Air Force, the National Institutes of Health, Amazon Web Services, GitLab, and Great Circle Technologies. What's next for innovation? Let's find out. Open source tools can improve collaboration, app development, and the speed of mission delivery. But the coding process can look a lot different if it falls in the classified realm instead of the unclassified realm. Here, our next panel shares best practices for bridging those two worlds and more. Mark Kriz is Strategic Leader of National Security Programs GitLab. Brent Bursey is President of Great Circle Technologies. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. What does the coding process look like? How is it different in a national security or classified environment as opposed to an unclassified environment?
Sure. So, Francis, it's similar in some ways in that you've got a set of developers. You typically have a government program manager or leader. You've got folks working across a spectrum of what we call the DevOps or development lifecycle. That occurs on the unclassified side and very similar on the classified. The challenge, though, is really around getting those teams to be able to communicate. A lot of times it's hard to find cleared developers, especially in the DMV, where we compete with all kinds of high-tech firms moving into the district. So there's a lot of times a shortage of talent, and that allows being able to develop code unclassified, allows the government leadership to be able to get code developed a lot faster.
Brent, does the code development process look different based on the type of application that you're developing, a critical infrastructure application versus some other kind of application, or does that not matter as much?
It doesn't really matter. The challenge fundamentally is that there are different sources that the government has, and frequently they have a lack of insight in terms of how the open source technologies might relate to that. And that's another area where communication can help, is taking knowledge about tools or processes on the outside, on the open internet, and then applying them in an integrated team with somebody that has knowledge of a particular source of exquisite data that the government gathers that no one else does.
And does the data source make a difference? Or the type of data? You mentioned the term exquisite data, which I think is really a great one. Does that matter as far as how you build the way, the piece of stuff that will use that data?
One of the biggest challenges that the government has is that they have massive data stores that are collected from a wide variety of sensors, people, and different types of technology. And frequently there isn't a corollary in the open source community or the open internet. And so we have programs that are focused on a single source. And some of this technology, we're looking at how we can bring to bear opportunities to meld concepts about how you can do things innovatively and how you can deal with very large data sources and bring them all together.
What are some of the best practices for the kind of disparities between classified and unclassified that you talked about a moment ago?
Sure. So one of the best practices is bringing everyone to both teams, the classified, the unclassified, Francis, bringing them together on the same page, or what government leaders like to refer to as having everyone speaking from the same sheet of music, right? So one of the best practices we've seen is where government programs will say, well, I need then a common technology foundation that at least allows me to seamlessly work from the low side, to have my developers and my program managers be able to bundle up all that hard work they've done, move it up to a secure enclave, and let my team in that secure enclave be able to pick it up without losing context of work.
Is that a dramatic difference, though, from what you've seen in the past? Or is that really a change in the way that organizations are doing business?
It's both. It's a change in the way organizations are doing business, and that change is really being driven by a couple of challenges. One of them is speed to mission. So the idea that if I'm developing code what my application in the past, Francis, it could be static for years at a time, right? Well, now the world is changing too fast, and the landscape that the government has to focus on is changing too quickly. They need to have software applications that adapt to our changing world, so they're needing to deliver code much faster, and that's one of the big drivers in doing some of your development unclassified and then the rest classified.
What have you seen, Brent, as far as collaboration among teams? Collaboration is tremendously important in that kind of environment and in all kinds of environments in this subject area. What have you seen as far as effective collaboration among teams and the individuals within those teams?
So we sponsored an internship program where we took unclassified interns from the region, some of the better schools, and their data science programs, and we helped them marry their innovative capabilities with customers that work in highly classified enclaves. And we were able to demonstrate using this framework mission value within just a summer. In fact, this last internship, we were able to convince a customer to continue those interns throughout the year because they can't hire people who have those particular schools. And so it's really a DevSecOps framework where we are wrapping security processes around these unclassified people, and they don't really understand that that's happening, and that's where that seamless communication can happen.
Were there barriers or hurdles to overcome in getting customers who work in a classified environment to understand part of your work can be done over here, it's not classified, and then we can move it? I mean, it strikes me that mental barrier might have been the hardest thing to overcome for both of your customers.
It really was. One of the best practices is to begin either for the program leadership or for us as technologists to begin working with the chief information security officer from the program or the broader agency. And what happens, Francis, if you get a security officer that is forward-leaning and says, you know what, the mission needs to develop at a much more rapid pace, I'm willing to lean a little bit forward with this idea that more of my application can be developed on the low side, or maybe it's, as Brent mentioned, it's a research project. More of my research can be done on the open internet, and then let's move it high where it needs to be mixed with that exquisite data, or where it needs to have those last couple of features that are really secure, they need to be developed.
Is that your experience too, that maybe the worldview or just kind of the mentality has been as much of an obstacle to overcome as the actual structure and laying out of the programs? I
agree. Culture is a big barrier, but there are a number of forward-leaning folks that have kids that are using apps, and they're amazed at the technology that is available, and they just don't understand how to relate it. And many large technology firms really don't understand the exquisite data that the U.S. government deals with, and so there's been a large gap. You have very powerful and capable companies, but they just don't know how to relate their technology. And so the collaboration of teams is critical, because if you can take subject matter experts on both sides and have them collaborate seamlessly and not have to worry about disclosing things that are inappropriate, then all of a sudden amazing things can happen.
So I want to expand on this collaboration idea, because it strikes me that it's not just a challenge in the coding environment. This is something that every agency is dealing with in every context, around data and around just about everything that you can think of. I'll ask each of you, I'll start with you, Mark, what are the best practices for collaboration, especially in an environment where some people know that there are some things that they can't talk about with these other folks?
Right.
I mean, that seems to me to be the most delicate thing that all of these people are navigating. Is that fair?
That is fair. And one of the best practices is truly, as I mentioned, you have to have that foundation of culture first, which is what is the critical driver to, first of all, making us change our culture to be more agile. We call it agility. And one of those drivers is that changing landscape of the world. So having that cultural piece first. Okay, I recognize there's a critical driver and I need to change my culture. Secondly, the collaboration then. Okay, maybe I'm willing to open up to this idea that I can collaborate across these silos, be them technology silos or cultural. And then lastly, how do I get everybody on the same sheet of music? How do I have one version of the truth? And that's where the technology comes in, that single foundational technology.
What have you seen in that area, the collaboration among people, where it's working well, How is it working, Brent?
And so I think part of what makes that happen is this concept of trust and illuminating that trust. So as we go through a process, if I have somebody who's never talked to somebody on the outside, giving them the tools and the insight that allows them to understand the situational context. Where is this particular individual that's contributing some code or to my conversation or product from cyber perspective, but also the individual, because just tracking where their system is not necessarily reflective of who that person happens to be. So it's important to understand and provide confidence. I'm having a conversation with somebody I can't see, but I have confidence that they are who I think they are.
I apologize because I don't remember which one of you said it, but we hit the term DevSecOps a little bit earlier, and that, I think it was you, Brent, and that shifted. It used to be DevOps. It is now DevSecOps. What difference does that make in the context of the conversation that we're having?
It goes to that point of trust. So if I'm going to bring something into my enclave, into my enterprise, can I trust it? And if it's a massive code bundle, which is traditionally what open source is, it's very difficult to understand that. There's lots of technology that will scan that, but in many instances, you can't capture with those tools the intent behind the person that's there. That changes, and when you're doing this in a collaborative way, where somebody in real time is now contributing something. So you don't have the luxury of just scanning the code. You want to understand the intent because you're sharing your requirements or feedback from tests. So that DevSecOps framework is really how do we put a wrapper of trust around the entire process? I think that's the simplest way to say it.
And what is your role then in helping all of the stuff that both Brent and you have talked about in facilitating this for a customer like we're discussing?
Sure. So that single foundation that we both talked about, so the technology that GitLab provides is a single end-to-end DevSecOps platform. So what we've done is brought in that ability to have context and therefore trust with teams working across various enclaves. So the technology being a single DevSecOps solution that covers all 10 stages gives you that ability to say, I've got everyone on the same sheet of music, I've got built-in security, I can trust this, and now I get the context around everything, and that speeds that time to mission.
We have about a little over 2 minutes left, and I want your feedback on this, both of your feedback on this question. We've talked a lot about the people, how the people interact with each other. What do the successful people that work in this space, whether they're on the classified side or the unclassified side, what do those individual people look like? What are their skill sets? What makes them successful? What attributes do they have? Mark, you go first.
Sure. So one of the attributes is that ability to lean forward, right? It's a bit of a risk taker, but it's risk within that management framework. And so that's one of the skills. And then the other skill is, you know what? I can start by contributing even the smallest little bit of contribution, what we call a minimal viable change, and then my teammates can collaborate and iterate on that. So, collaboration and leaning forward.
What are the successful attributes that you see, Brent?
So one of the challenges we have is a lot of the coders that use these frameworks are data scientists and others that are generally introverted people. And so this type of framework allows effectively an IT shadow. So they can do their thing, and the technology framework can capture tidbits about what they're doing and how they're doing it, when and where, and then that becomes the basis for sharing, and then there's an opportunity for somebody to engage that introvert and say, ooh, I discovered that you're doing something that's relevant to me, starts the conversation, and when somebody else starts the conversation, they're happy to talk about what they want. I think that's what's critical about that technology.
All right, final minute. We've talked about a lot of upside. What's the downside that organizations should be looking for in this area? Give me a quick 30-second answer, each one of you. Mark first.
30-second answer would be to make sure that the government leader engages with those trusted partners that also are forward-leaning, because they will be the trusted partner that sort of helps them herd the cats, so to speak, in this kind of
Brent?
And I think herding the cats is the challenge. There are a myriad of tools out there, and many people are overwhelmed. And that's one of the reasons why we've partnered with GitLab, because that integrated workflow is key. It's very easy for the customers to adapt. If they have a few licenses, they can take advantage of that. But the confidence that they have this seamless workflow is simplifying.
Brent and Mark, thanks both very much for a great conversation. Happy to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francis.
The Tech Leadership Series Innovation is brought to you in part by GitLab. Learn more at about.gitlab.com/solutions/public-sector.